All right, so this is going to be the most informal video I've ever made. I'm doing it in my car. My hair's a mess. I don't even have a stand for the iPhone, so I'm literally holding it up with my hands. And I just decided to make this video because the impulse hit me. I have been debating for weeks, actually for months, whether to make this video because I know it's going to be extremely controversial, and I know that it's going to lose some followers and some subscribers for me. Particularly my friends on the left, who some of you have loved the stuff that I've been doing on Cuomo, defending Cuomo, and I see some of my Cuomo defenders. I see on Twitter that you have in your title, you have things like in your handle, your name, you have things like fully vaxxed, get the damn vax, etc., etc. So look, prepare to be irritated with me, but here's the thing: I have to speak my conscience. And just like you appreciated, some of you, me speaking my conscience when it came to Johnny Depp, when it came to Marilyn Manson, and yes, when it came to Andrew Cuomo, well, guess what? Here I'm gonna have to speak my conscience about something that's gonna make me unpopular with a number of you. And you're just gonna have to deal with it or unsubscribe, do what you will. But I hope that you'll keep in mind that this is coming from the same place that my defense of Cuomo and Manson and Johnny Depp came from, which is my conscience, all right? I do not believe that it is right that we have gotten to a place where basically society in various avenues, whether we're talking about the government, the military, corporations, the entertainment industry, what have you, schools, a number of colleges mandating the vaccine now, and they're even talking about mandating it for public school. I do not think that it is right that society now is basically mandating that people get the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, to participate in society. And you might say, well, it's not mandatory. It's not like China, or something, or no one's coming to your door and forcing you to take a vaccine, so it's not mandatory. Well, yes, it is. It's de facto mandatory, because if you have to get a vaccine to get a job in a corporation that's mandating it, or a company, or you work for the government, or you work for the military, or you want to participate in certain entertainment events that are mandating the vaccine, if you want to go to a school that's mandating the vaccine, then basically, yes, it is mandatory if you want to have a life. Okay, and so don't give me that argument that it's not mandatory because not everyone is being forced. Yes, it is basically de facto mandatory. Okay, for large swaths of society, for participation in society at the levels at which I've just outlined, it has become mandatory for a number of people, and it seems to be increasing. I wasn't going to make this video because I thought, well, okay, it's not that bad or whatever, but it seems like every day I read another story about another company or another government mandate or whatever, or another actor like Sean Penn, who says that he doesn't want unvaccinated people in the movie theaters for his movie screenings, and Sean Penn saying that if you breathe on another person, it's like it's the same thing as if you take a gun and shoot them in the face. All right, I've had enough of this. I've had enough of it. Okay, I am not generally anti-vax. I also really hate the way that if you are against mandatory COVID vaccination and pressure to get a COVID shot, that you're depicted as some kind of loony, crazy anti-vaxxer. All right, I'm not anti-vax. I had all my vaccinations for mumps and measles and all of that stuff. That you have to get to go to public school. My parents got me vaccinated when I was a kid. If I had a child, I would get them vaccinated for various things. Okay, I'm not the anti-vax generally. All right. Although I do believe, yes, that it's good to have a little bit of humility when it comes to the human body, when it comes to science. And I don't think it's beyond the pale to think that perhaps there could be some problems that some people have with the standard vaccination panel. But I'm not going to get into that. All right. As I said, generally speaking, support vaccines and so forth. But the thing with the COVID vaccine, all right, is that I understand the studies that have been done. Okay, I keep up with the science and all of that. And in a future video, I want to lay all of this out and go through it, point by point. But here's the thing: despite the studies that have been done, this is a brand new vaccine. It's been a hot minute since this thing was out. It's been a hot minute since COVID was even on the scene. Okay, and you think about the fact that COVID has not even, relatively speaking, been out that long. And this vaccine has not, there's multiple COVID vaccines, but the COVID vaccines have not gone through the usual extensive testing, and not only the usual extensive testing, but also the long-term observation that is required to determine whether something is truly safe long-term, what the side effects will be, etc., etc. All right? It's just there hasn't been enough time. And I understand why the process of vaccine development was expedited. I understand this is an unusual situation and so forth. But look, if you dig into it and you do the research, that we have not gone about this vaccine development in a standard way. And that's why normally it takes years and years to develop a vaccine and to get it through all of the testing and FDA approval and all of that it needs. And instead we developed these COVID vaccines in a year, basically, less than a year for some of them. So it's unprecedented. And one of the problems that I have is that this attitude that if you are not comfortable taking a vaccine, getting a vaccine that has been developed in an unprecedented amount of time and has not gone through the usual approval period and has not gone through as many hoops, nearly as many hoops as is as standard, and has been developed super fast and is using new mRNA technology. This is not the mumps vaccine or the measles vaccine. This is not the vaccines of old. All right, this is relatively new science. And so what I'm saying to you is that the idea that someone who does not want to get the vaccine or wants to wait, wants to give it some time, is some kind of crazy anti-vaxxer, or worse yet, is a murderer, is someone who doesn't care about the lives of people with COVID, doesn't care about the people they might be killing, is selfish. I'm sorry, but that's just really wrong, all right? It really bothers me, okay? I know people have had COVID. I know one person sort of tangentially who died of COVID. None of my friends, family, or anyone like that. But yes, I'm aware, okay? I'm not a COVID denier. But look, life is full of death. And I feel like our society has gotten to the point where we are really kind of wimpy now when it comes to the serious and dark realities of life. And one of those realities is that life is dangerous, diseases will pop up out of nowhere, and yes, people die. And I'm all for prevention and trying to prevent that from happening and everything. But if part of our approach to fighting COVID is to basically force the population to get a vaccine that has not gone through the standard testing period, has not been around long enough for us to know the long-term side effects, or even in some cases the short-term side effects, to act like someone is crazy or selfish or a murderer because they're refusing a vaccine under those conditions, I'm sorry, but that's just wrong. That is wrong. I've had lots of friends and family who get the vaccine, all right? I don't tell them not to. I'm not out here crusading against the vaccine. Hell, I might get the vaccine. But this idea, and not anytime soon, but I might, but this idea that it's crazy, it's loony, or it's selfish or wrong for someone to refuse the vaccine that has been out a hot minute and that and under these conditions that are unprecedented, I'm sorry, that's just not right, okay? A number of you, I see all the time, I see this slogan, trust the science, listen to the science. Well, look, I'm an academic, okay? Now, I got my PhD in English. I did not get my PhD in biology or pharmacology or whatever, okay? But I have had enough exposure to academia, and I know enough academics in the sciences to know that when you say trust the science, that is a deeply flawed proposition, okay? Because first of all, science itself is not, it is not a list of maxims that once established, one has to abide by. Science is it's a group of ever-changing fields and ever-changing approaches. And there are things that scientists and doctors can be adamant about at one point that 5, 10 years, 20 years later, it turns out, oh my God, we were wrong. Okay, I'll give you a case in point. It used to be thought that that carbs were not bad for you. In fact, I remember my grandfather when he had heart problems. The doctor told him, just worry about not eating too much meat. Okay, but it was so he was avoiding eggs and he was avoiding steak, but he was eating tons of pasta and tons of chocolate, candies and Cokes and all of that. And at that point, the science indicated that sugar, was not the dominant scientific and medical narrative was that carbs and sugar were not the problem and meat was the problem. Well, if you've been paying attention or you've done any research or whatever, you know that narrative is now flipped, okay? And that now we understand that carbs and sugar and these things actually heavily contribute to heart disease and cardiovascular disease and inflammation and a number of other problems, perhaps even cancer, okay? And I could tick through point after point. I could tick through topic after topic where the settled science was years later overturned, or where it turned out that the situation was way more complicated than first thought, et cetera, et cetera. Also, you have to understand that even though yes, science is a wonderful thing and we've come a long way, it is still academia and the field of scientific research and pharmaceutical research and so forth. It is still deeply flawed and deeply problematic. And so just to say trust the science, okay? Well, what exactly does that mean when when science has been proven time and time again in the past to have flaws or to have issues, or when the standard scientific perspective on things has been overturned or has been proven wrong years later? I'll get into this in a future video, but several years ago, there was a scientist and a physician who decided that he was going to write a book about this topic, about the topic of science and the inaccuracy at times of science and so forth. And basically, so what he did is he went back and he looked at a number of topics in which it seemed like the science is very settled. And he went back and he looked at some of these issues and he looked at some of the studies and he cross-referenced stuff and so forth. And basically what he found, and this is not just him, this is a number of people who've looked at this and have said the same thing, is that even with major studies, major medical research, scientific studies, even with supposedly settled ideas, when you actually dig into it, you find huge inconsistencies. You find huge problems with some of the major studies. You find many cases where two seemingly equally valid studies or multiple equally valid studies cancel each other out or get different results or whatever. And so my point is not that we need to go back to some Stone Age view of like, well, we can't trust any science, or fuck science. It's actually not very accurate. I'm just saying that we need a lot of humility about our beliefs, and not just about things like our religious beliefs or our political beliefs, but we need to have a humility about our capacity to truly understand the truth when it comes to scientific and medical things, because there have just been like thousands of cases where what seemed like established scientific truth has been overturned or has been shown to be more complicated or problematic than was first thought. All right? We do the best that we can. We function the best that we can with the knowledge that we have. But look, science is flawed, okay? And COVID science in particular, and I'm going to get into this in my next video, but COVID science and this pharmaceutical research that's been done to develop these COVID vaccines, it is particularly flawed. All right, because it is new, because it's been rushed. It's been extremely rushed. Like I said, a typical vaccine, it takes years and years to develop. And this has been very fast. Okay, it's been very fast. And to act like people are crazy or evil or inhumane because they are refusing to put something into their body that is relatively untested, and about which there's actually still not a lot of evidence, not a lot of research, and the research that has come in is not 100%. It is not conclusive. Right now, and I'll get into this in my next video, but right now Israel is considering encouraging or mandating even a third booster shot, because they're seeing their death rates are going up again now, despite all of the vaccinations. And what's happening is, if you pay attention and you look below the surface of the standard media narrative, what you're finding actually is that there's a lot of indications now, and the FDA knows this, and a lot of people know this, but they don't want to talk about it. There's a lot of indications that the vaccines are probably less effective than believed, and that they lose their, whatever effectiveness they may have, they lose it very quickly over a period of months. And there really is, and there's not conclusive evidence that the vaccine will work for longer than a period of months. And the thing is, once again, is that we don't know what the long-term effects are going to be. I'm sorry, we just don't know, because there is no long-term. This thing is, it's been, like I said, it's been a hot minute since any of this has been out. And I understand, you know, that that people may say, well, okay, we don't know for sure, but if I'm faced with a choice between getting COVID and perhaps getting really sick and even dying, or getting the vaccine and it turns out that maybe it does cause some long-term bad effects that I don't know about or I wasn't anticipating, well, I'd rather bet on the COVID shot. That's fine. That's great. I'm not telling you not to. You know, my own mother, she asked me if she should get the shot because she has health issues and stuff. And I said, Mom, I can't answer that for you, but you have to weigh the possible pros and cons and make the decision you think is best. Well, she decided to get the shot, and that's great. Okay? I'm never going to tell, unless I get more information indicating that it's needed, I'm never going to tell anyone not to get the shot. But what I'm talking about is an issue of civil liberties, but also an issue of common sense. And if we've gotten to the point now where we are basically making it difficult or impossible for huge swaths of the population to participate in society on multiple levels, from employment to entertainment and to school, unless they get the shot, I just think that's wrong. I do think that's wrong. And it is particularly galling to me to see people who otherwise are very open-minded and very and people who I think are very sort of humble about things in other respects, just getting completely swept up in this media narrative and being so angry about this. Again, a number of you Cuomo supporters, you know, you were so great about keeping an open mind on the Cuomo thing and trying to wade through the bullshit and trying to make intellectually and morally reasonable assertions about due process and so forth. And yet, some of the things that some of you post on your Twitter feed are so antagonistic toward people who don't want to get the vaccine. And you talk about these people like they're just lunatics or like they're murderers or whatever. And I would just ask you to perhaps try to take some of the same attitudes that you've employed in this this Cuomo situation, and maybe take another look at your approach to the COVID vaccine, or at least the way that you're making people feel who choose not to get it right now. I brought up the other day on Twitter a short story that Stephen King wrote many years ago. I believe it's called The End of the Whole Mess. There's also a short a TV show that was made about it. Maybe I'll link it in the comments. And the premise of this short story is that a very zealous scientist, a brilliant, zealous scientist, comes up, develops a kind of vaccine. It's not an injection. It's something it's a kind of an aerosol that, and anyway, he develops this vaccine. And the point of the vaccine is to eliminate the violent human instincts, because he figures out a way through this vaccine to make people peaceful. And so what he does is he forcibly distributes this vaccine over the entire planet. And I won't go into how he does that or whatever, but basically he gives people the vaccine without their consent or even really their knowledge, and the vaccine goes everywhere and everybody gets it. And what happens is, at first, things work great. The violent impulses do go away, and the earth becomes peaceful, and this guy, he wins the Nobel Prize, and he's celebrated, and he's a hero. But then what happens is, a little later, I think in the short story it takes about a year, maybe longer, I can't remember the time frame, but what happens is, a little bit later, like a year or two later, everybody who got the vaccine starts developing Alzheimer's, because it turns out, you know, the guy, he didn't have all the time that he needed to do the research or to study the long-term effects, and he had a particular blind spot, as everybody does. Even science has blind spots, okay? And if you don't believe that, well, I'm going to go into that in another video. What I'm going to do in my next video is I'm going to actually go through and talk about all of the things that science, that settled scientific theory once claimed were absolute, truths. And then later it was discovered that they were wrong, or these propositions were deeply flawed. But anyway, my point is, this guy in this short story, he distributes this vaccine. A year or two later, everybody who got it develops Alzheimer's and they die. Now, what is the point of that story? Well, one of the points of that story is about hubris, about scientific hubris, and also about human hubris. And the fact that even at times when we think that we're doing the right thing, we can be doing the wrong thing. And also another point of the story is that zealotry and being a zealot can be a very dangerous proposition. A zealot is someone who is fanatical about something from a place of conscience. So there are religious zealots, for instance. There can be political zealots and so forth. And so the lesson of this short story is that zealotry can be a problem when it blinds people to other possibilities. And so in the short story, it never occurred to this scientist that this vaccine, which dampens the human impulse toward violence, could also perhaps have other effects, and it turns out Alzheimer's. All right. Now, I'm not saying that I think that people who get one of the COVID vaccines are going to develop Alzheimer's. Okay. And look, again, it may turn out that it's fine. I may end up getting it one day too. But my point is that, to me, it seems like such a basic principle. The idea that there's not been enough time, and also the idea that people are entitled to have a certain amount of autonomy over their bodies. Okay? And to tell someone that they have to inject a powerful drug into their systems that we just have to be honest, we don't really know, okay, what the long-term side effects are. And this is mRNA technology. If you've looked into this, you know that this vaccine is employing new technology. This is not the mumps vaccine or measles vaccine or whatever. This is not your standard vaccine panel that you or your kids had to get to go to school. Okay, this is different. And yes, I know that scientists have been studying mRNA technology for a number of years, but this is the first time that an mRNA vaccine has been employed for a widespread ailment like this. It is very new technology, and it functions. I'll get into this in my later video, but it functions differently than standard vaccines. And so look, there's still a big question mark. And like I said, when you look into a number of these studies, you find where there are problems. Okay, they're just not getting televised, or they're not getting promoted. These issues, these questions, these inconsistencies, they're not getting a lot of airplay because the dominant media narrative has taken over, and that dominant media narrative is that everyone should get the COVID shot. It is your duty as a citizen of the US, as a human being, as a moral person, to get the COVID shot. And if you don't, then you're an idiot who doesn't care if you kill people. And it is just wrong. Now, another question that I have, and this is something that I'm going to go into in my next video, I do not understand why, if the COVID shot is so effective, all right, which again, we're seeing in a number of cases, like the results that are coming out of Israel, and even over here, we're being told that we have to get booster shots, and we may have to get numerous booster shots to maintain the effectiveness of this vaccine. But another problem that I have with this is the idea that you're killing someone. It's someone compared it to AIDS or HIV. They said that not getting the COVID shot is the equivalent of having sex with people when you know that you have AIDS or HIV. I'm sorry, that is not right either, okay? Because first of all, we're not talking about people who know that they have COVID. It's not like if I refuse the vaccine that I know that I have COVID and I'm going out there and I'm going to work and I'm doing all this stuff and I'm just spreading it around. Hopefully, if you know that you have COVID, then you're taking precautions not to spread it. Now, you say, well, what about all of the asymptomatic people who don't know that they have it and they're spreading it around? Well, okay, here's my question. Why, if the COVID shot is so effective, okay, if it does if it does have a very significant effect on making the illness less severe and of keeping people from dying or whatever, which again, what's coming out of Israel is telling us probably not. But if it does, then why can't you get the shot to protect yourself? Why do I have to get the shot? Okay, if it's effective, if the vaccine is effective, then it should be effective. And if it's not effective, then it's not effective. I mean, I just don't understand. And yes, I understand the argument that society it's more effective the more people who get in the cumulative and the aggregate. It's more effective the more people get the shot and everything. But you could say that about a lot of stuff. Thousands of people die of car wrecks every year. And I think that many fewer people would die of car wrecks if we forced everyone to take, let's say, 10 hours of driving classes a week for a year. Okay, now you'd say, well, that's absurd. I shouldn't have to do that. Well, but a lot of people die because they haven't had enough driving instruction, right? We're putting teenagers out there on the road with really not a lot of driving instruction beyond those, stupid classes or that don't take, very long to get through or whatever. Or what about, all of the people that are dying of cardiovascular disease because they're getting bad food? Aren't the producers of candy and the producers of alcohol and all of these things, aren't they killing people? I mean, alcohol has no benefit to society, all right? Other than helping people to get laid and making people a little more gregarious. There is no benefit to society. All it does is destroy families, destroy people's lives. It causes car wrecks. It causes death in a number of cases. It causes violence. What is the reason why we allow people to sell alcohol? So look, there's so many other things I could come up with, so many other examples of where if people were forced to change their behavior or forced to do things differently, then we would save a lot of lives. But we recognize in society that we have to balance, that there has to be a balance between encouraging healthy behaviors and on the other hand, leaving a certain amount of leeway for people to make their own decisions and understanding that, sometimes in society, there are going to be some people who die in order to maintain other aspects of society that we want. So we recognize that yes, thousands of people will die every year from alcohol, and yet we choose to let those people die because we want to continue to have alcohol as an aspect of our society. So those of you who don't want to ban alcohol, are you murderers? Are you idiots? And I understand that's not a perfect analogy, but you hear what I'm trying to get at. Why don't companies mandate that their employees exercise an hour a day or 30 minutes a day? I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we could be saving lives by mandating behaviors, okay? But we don't do that. Now, the COVID vaccine, it's again, if it's effective, it should be effective. If your COVID vaccine is effective, then I shouldn't have to get the COVID vaccine as well. That's what doesn't make sense to me. And I'm happy to read comments. Please post before you unsubscribe from me in anger over this video. Please leave your comments and let me and I will address them in the next video, because like I said, this is off the cuff. I haven't prepared it. I'm not nearly as eloquent as I would like to be, but I've just had enough and I had to put this out there. All right. And so again, that's what I would say. How can you have a little humility, please? And what Sean Penn said about breathing, that when you're talking to someone and you share breath, that's the same if you're unvaccinated as shooting someone in the face, or that's the same as having sex with someone when you have AIDS. I mean, really, if I have to explain to you why that is a problematic analogy, then we really are on a totally different page. If we've gotten to the point now where breathing on someone when you might possibly have some asymptomatic COVID infection, when we've gotten to that point where that's considered murder, I don't know what to say. And, let me give you one more example. HPV, all right? The human papillomavirus. It causes thousands of deaths, probably worldwide, millions of deaths, because HPV is what causes cervical cancer. It causes anal cancer. It can cause throat cancer and all kinds of other cancers. And cervical cancer is one of the deadliest cancers you can get, for instance. Now, most people who are sexually active have had HPV or have HPV, all right? It is not something that doctors test for, like herpes. It is not something that doctors test for in a standard STD panel. Why? Because so many people have it. And it's the same thing with herpes, by the way. 1 out of 4 people have herpes. And for most people, for the vast majority of people, it's asymptomatic. And doctors don't test for it on a standard panel, because if they did, then it would be kind of pointless, because you've got tons of people running around with it, and for the most part, it's asymptomatic. And my point is, though, when we talk about that, or we talk about more specifically HPV, which does kill people, all right? You've got tons of people running around with HPV. Well, why is it that we don't, as a society, mandate mandatory HPV testing, say once a year or once every 6 months or whatever, and that we mandate that people with HPV cannot have sex with anyone? We'd be saving lives, right? We recognize in society, though, that there are limits to what we can do to make everything happy and safe and healthy for everyone in a deeply flawed, problematic world. Now, why is AIDS different? Well, AIDS is different because if you get AIDS, you are automatically going to die, minus, medical treatment and intervention. Now, of course, you get the treatment. It's basically like having diabetes, right? But we recognize that someone who is infected with a surefire deadly disease, or a disease that for the rest of their life is going to make them take medication, and someone who is knowingly spreading that around, we recognize that as being extremely serious and extremely problematic behavior. But with COVID, the difference that I see is that, first of all, despite the fact that too many people have died from COVID, again, for the vast majority, for 99% of people, it's not going to kill them. Secondly, we recognize, it's asymptomatic. You can have it, you may not know it. And so my point being that we have to understand that these are nuanced issues, and that it's not a one size fits all thing. And again, if you think that my not getting the COVID vaccine is the equivalent of my having AIDS and knowingly having sex with other people and spreading it, then I guess I need to address that in a future video more, because to me that seems like a crazy analogy. But if you don't, put it in the comments, let's talk about it, all right? So anyway, this video turned out to be longer than what I wanted, but here's my argument. I've laid it out, and I just think that I think that it's really sad that people have such a knee-jerk reaction to this. People just love to jump on these bandwagons and be sanctimonious about stuff. And it's very easy to say to other people, "Oh, you haven't had the vaccine. Well, you're a horrible person, and you don't care if other people die." No, it's a lot more complicated than that. I haven't had the vaccine because it's new. It's mRNA technology. It's very powerful technology. I'm going to get into it in my next video, but it's not nothing, okay? It's potentially very, very serious. This stuff has been around a hot minute. It's still, the research is much more inconclusive than the media or even the FDA would like for you to think. I noticed the FDA, though, this morning it came out that they're not recommending a third booster because they say the research is not there. So even the FDA is trying to get the memo on some of this. And also, I believe that people should not have to get a shot that's relatively new and whose long-term effects are not known to participate in all these different avenues of society. All right. So to me, this is really messed up. And honestly, what I think it comes down to is we are living in a highly advanced society now, and we have taken death and we have tucked it away in the hospitals so that people don't have to deal with it or see it. We deny aging in our society. We deny mortality. We have gotten away from religion. I'm not a Christian or anything, but I see a lot of value in spirituality and belief in God and belief in some kind of an afterlife. And the thing is, in a kind of a hyper secular society that we're in now, and a society that thinks it has all of the answers and that science solves everything, etc., people don't, and in a society in which the gory details of illness and death are tucked away, people have gotten in this mindset that mortality is something that we shouldn't have to deal with. And if there are people out there dying of COVID, then that means that somebody is at fault, and those somebodies are now the unvaccinated people. No. Death is a fact of life. We live in a deeply flawed world, as the Bible would say, a fallen world. And I think that some people need to wake up to the idea that every day that you are alive. You're taking risks. I'm in a car right now. I'm about to drive. That is very risky. But you know what? We get used to the risk. We understand that even though we're driving around in these death machines called cars, and we have teenagers in cars and elderly people in cars and all, and babies in, cars, hopefully not driving, we understand, you know what, that there are limits to how much we can make everything safe for everyone. There are limits to how much we can curtail death. And one of those limits should be civil liberties, and also the rights of people to have a certain kind of autonomy over their bodies, and especially over new mRNA technology and a vaccine that has come out in an unprecedented amount of time and has not been out long enough for us to understand the long-term efficacy or the long-term side effects of it. All right. So please stick around. I'm going to do a longer video. This wasn't as eloquent as what I wanted, but I just had to get this out there. All right. So have a good day. I look forward to reading whatever you have to say in the comments. Bye.